She's pregnant with twins and stuck in jail, but the billionaire CEO husband is partying with Mistress in Vegas. Ryan, please, I'm begging you. Isabella's voice cracked through the static of the jail phone, her hands shaking as she pressed the receiver against her ear. The babies, they're in distress. The doctor says the stress could cause premature labor. I need you to get me out of here. The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like eternity before Ryan Blackstone's cold voice cut through her desperation. Isabella, I can't be associated with this scandal. My lawyers have advised me to maintain distance until this situation resolves itself. Situation? Isabella's voice rose, causing other inmates to look in her direction. Ryan, I'm 6 months pregnant with your twins, sitting in a jail cell for crimes I didn't commit, and you're calling this a situation? You brought this on yourself, Ryan replied, his tone devoid of the warmth she'd known for 5 years of marriage. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Maybe you should focus on cooperating with the authorities instead of calling me for help I can't provide. I didn't steal that money. Isabella sobbed, her free hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly. Ryan, you know me. You know I would never steal from the foundation that helps women and children. How can you believe I'm capable of this? People change, Isabella, Ryan said quietly, and she could hear female laughter in the background, champagne glasses clinking. Sometimes we discover that the people closest to us aren't who we thought they were. Where are you? Isabella asked, a terrible suspicion forming in her chest. Ryan, where are you right now? That's not your concern anymore, Ryan replied. Isabella, I suggest you focus on your legal defense and stop calling me. My attorney says these conversations could be used against both of us. The line went dead, leaving Isabella holding a silent phone while her unborn twins kicked restlessly inside her, as if sensing their mother's anguish and their father's abandonment. Have you ever trusted someone completely only to discover they've been living a double life? Have you ever needed someone most when they were busy betraying you? Tonight, you'll witness a pregnant woman fighting for her freedom from jail while her billionaire husband celebrates with his mistress in Vegas, not knowing that his betrayal will cost him everything he thinks he owns. But here's the question that will haunt you. When the truth finally comes out, will justice be enough to heal a heart broken by the person who was supposed to protect it? If you believe that karma is real and that the truth always finds a way to surface, hit that subscribe button right now because this story will restore your faith in justice and show you that sometimes our darkest moments become our greatest victories. 2 years earlier, Isabella Martinez had believed in fairy tales until the morning FBI agents knocked on her door at 6 a.m. and turned her life into a nightmare. But the fairy tale had started 5 years before that, when she was a struggling forensic accountant working 60-hour weeks to pay off student loans, and Ryan Blackstone was the charismatic CEO of a rising tech empire. Miss Martinez, Ryan had said during their first meeting, when Isabella was auditing his company's charitable foundation finances, I've reviewed your preliminary report, and I'm impressed by your attention to detail. Isabella had looked up from her laptop, startled by the tall, dark-haired man in the expensive suit who had entered the foundation office unannounced. Mr. Blackstone, I wasn't expecting you today. I thought you were in Dubai for the tech summit. I flew back early, Ryan had said with the smile that would eventually win her heart and destroy her life. I wanted to personally thank the accountant who discovered the discrepancies that my own CFO missed. I was just doing my job, Isabella had replied, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks under his intense gaze. The foundation's books had some irregularities that needed investigation. And you found irregularities that saved us from a potential scandal, Ryan had said, moving closer to her workstation. Isabella, may I call you Isabella? I'd like to offer you a position as our head of financial oversight for the Blackstone Foundation. I appreciate the offer, but I have my own practice, Isabella had said carefully, though the salary he mentioned was triple what she made as an independent consultant. Think about it, Ryan had said, placing his business card on her desk. Isabella, someone with your skills could revolutionize how we approach charitable giving. You could impact thousands of lives. The courtship that followed had been a whirlwind of expensive dinners, weekend trips to his Hamptons estate, and conversations that lasted until dawn about changing the world through strategic philanthropy. Ryan had been attentive, generous, and completely focused on her in a way that made Isabella feel like the most important person in his universe. "You're different from other women I've dated," Ryan had told her 6 months later as they walked along the beach behind his estate, waves crashing against the shore under a full moon. "Different how?" Isabella had asked, her hand warm in his as they strolled across the sand. "You care about things that matter," Ryan had said, stopping to face her. "Money, success, influence, they're just tools to you. Tools for making the world better. Most people I know see them as the end goal." "What do you see them as?" Isabella had asked, studying his face in the moonlight. "With you, I'm starting to see them the way you do," Ryan had replied, pulling her close. "Isabella, you make me want to be better than I am." The proposal had come 8 months later, during a foundation gala where Isabella had just announced a $50 million initiative to provide educational scholarships for underprivileged girls. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan had said, taking the microphone after Isabella's presentation, "tonight you've heard from the most brilliant, compassionate, and beautiful woman I've ever known. Isabella Martinez has changed my life and countless others through her work with our foundation." Isabella had stood frozen on the stage as Ryan dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that sparkled under the ballroom lights. "Isabella, will you marry me and continue changing the world together?" Ryan had asked, his voice carrying over the sound system to 500 guests who held their breath waiting for her answer. "Yes," Isabella had whispered, then louder as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes, of course yes." Their wedding 18 months later had been featured in 3 magazines and attended by celebrities, politicians, and tech industry leaders. Isabella had worn her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, while Ryan had looked devastatingly handsome in his custom tuxedo. "I promise to love you, support your dreams, and build a life with you that makes the world brighter," Ryan had vowed during their ceremony in the garden of his estate. "I promise to be your partner in everything, to trust you completely, and to love you with all my heart for the rest of my life," Isabella had replied, meaning every word. For 3 years, Isabella had believed they were living up to those promises. She had thrown herself into expanding the Blackstone Foundation's reach, creating programs that provided microloans to women entrepreneurs, funded domestic violence shelters, and built schools in underserved communities. "You've tripled our impact in 3 years," Ryan had said one evening as they reviewed foundation reports in his home office. "Isabella, you're incredible." "We're incredible," Isabella had corrected, leaning against his shoulder as they sat together on his leather sofa. "I couldn't do any of this without your support and resources. I love watching you work," Ryan had said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You get this light in your eyes when you talk about helping people. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The cracks had started small. Ryan's increasing travel schedule, business trips that lasted longer than planned, phone calls he took in private, text messages he angled away from her when they arrived. "How was London?" Isabella had asked when Ryan returned from a week-long business trip, noticing that he seemed distracted and distant. "Productive," Ryan had replied, not meeting her eyes as he sorted through mail on his desk. "The European expansion is moving faster than expected." "That's wonderful," Isabella had said, though something in his tone made her uneasy. "Did you get a chance to visit the shelter we're funding in Manchester?" "No, schedule was too tight," Ryan had said, still not looking at her. "Isabella, I'm exhausted. Can we catch up tomorrow?" The pattern had continued for months, Ryan becoming increasingly absent even when he was physically present, their conversations growing shorter and more superficial, their intimacy diminishing to the point where Isabella wondered if she had done something wrong. "Ryan, are we okay?" Isabella had finally asked one evening after he had spent dinner scrolling through his phone instead of talking to her. "We're fine," Ryan had replied automatically. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you seem distant lately," Isabella had said carefully. "Like your mind is somewhere else even when you're home." "I'm just stressed about the company," Ryan had said, finally putting his phone down. "The expansion is more complex than we anticipated. I'm sorry if I've been distracted." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Isabella had offered. "Maybe I could take on more of the foundation work, so you have one less thing to worry about." "Actually, that would be great," Ryan had said, brightening for the first time in weeks. "Isabella, Would you mind taking full oversight of the foundation's finances? I trust you completely, and it would free up bandwidth for me to focus on the core business. Isabella had agreed immediately, grateful for the chance to feel useful and connected to Ryan's work again. She had thrown herself into the foundation's operations with renewed energy, not realizing that she was walking into a trap that had been carefully constructed around her. The pregnancy had been a surprise, discovered during a routine doctor's appointment when Isabella had been feeling unusually tired and nauseous. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackstone," Dr. Sarah Chun had said with a smile, reviewing Isabella's test results. "You're about 8 weeks pregnant." Pregnant? Isabella had stared at the doctor in shock. "But we haven't been trying. Sometimes these things happen naturally," Dr. Chun had said gently. "How do you feel about this news?" "Overwhelmed," Isabella had admitted. "But happy. Really happy." Isabella had driven home from the appointment with her mind racing, planning how to tell Ryan the news. She had imagined his face lighting up with joy, his hands on her belly, their conversations about names and nursery designs. "Ryan," Isabella had said that evening when he came home from work, "I have something wonderful to tell you." "Can it wait?" Ryan had asked, loosening his tie with the exhausted gesture she'd grown accustomed to. "I have 3 international calls tonight." "It's important," Isabella had insisted, taking his hands and leading him to the living room. "Ryan, we're going to have a baby." Ryan had stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "A baby? I'm 8 weeks pregnant," Isabella had said, watching his face for signs of the joy she expected. "Ryan, we're going to be parents." "That's wonderful," Ryan had said, but his smile hadn't reached his eyes. "Isabella, that's really wonderful news." "You don't seem happy," Isabella had observed, her own excitement dimming. "I am happy," Ryan had insisted, pulling her into a hug that felt perfunctory rather than passionate. "I'm just surprised. The timing is challenging with everything happening at work. But good challenging, right?" Isabella had asked hopefully. "Of course," Ryan had replied. "Isabella, this is great news. I just need time to process it." But Ryan hadn't seemed to process it so much as compartmentalize it. He had congratulated her in the appropriate moments, attended the important doctor's appointments, and discussed practical matters like converting the spare room into a nursery. But Isabella had felt increasingly alone in her excitement about their growing family. The news had gotten even more overwhelming at the 12-week ultrasound. "Well, this is a surprise," Dr. Chun had said, moving the ultrasound wand across Isabella's belly while studying the monitor. "It looks like you're having twins." "Twins?" Isabella had gasped, staring at the screen where 2 tiny heartbeats flickered like stars. "2 healthy babies," Dr. Chun had confirmed with a smile. "Congratulations, this is quite a blessing." Isabella had turned to Ryan, expecting to see wonder and excitement in his face. Instead, she had seen something that looked almost like panic. "Twins," Ryan had repeated quietly. "2 babies." "2 babies," Isabella had agreed, reaching for his hand. "Ryan, can you believe it? We're going to have twins." "It's incredible," Ryan had said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isabella, this changes our planning significantly." "Good changes," Isabella had said firmly. "Ryan, we're going to be parents to 2 beautiful babies. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to us." Ryan had nodded and smiled, but Isabella had felt a distance growing between them that had nothing to do with physical space and everything to do with the fact that her husband seemed to view their pregnancy as a complication rather than a miracle. As Isabella's pregnancy progressed, Ryan's absences had become more frequent and longer. Business trips that kept him away for weeks. Evening meetings that ran until midnight. Weekend conferences that she wasn't invited to attend. "I feel like I'm going through this pregnancy alone," Isabella had confessed to her sister Carmen during one of their weekly phone calls. "Where's Ryan?" Carmen had asked, concern evident in her voice. "Working," Isabella had replied, the word carrying all her frustration and loneliness. "Always working. He leaves early, comes home late, and when he is here, he's checking emails or taking calls." "Isabella, you're 6 months pregnant with twins," Carmen had said firmly. "This should be one of the most exciting times in your marriage. If Ryan is too busy for that, something is seriously wrong. He's building an empire, Carmen," Isabella had defended, though the words felt hollow. "The company is expanding internationally. There are demands on his time that I need to understand. There are also demands on your time, Carmen had pointed out. You're growing two human beings while running a multi-million-dollar foundation. But you still make time for your marriage. Why doesn't he? Isabella hadn't had an answer for that question, just a growing suspicion that there were parts of Ryan's life she knew nothing about. The morning of her arrest, Isabella had been reviewing foundation financial reports when she noticed discrepancies that made her blood run cold. Large transfers that she hadn't authorized. Accounts in her name that she had never opened. Financial patterns that looked exactly like the embezzlement schemes she had studied in her forensic accounting training. This can't be right, Isabella had muttered, pulling up bank records on her computer. These transfers show my authorization, but I never approved any of these. Isabella had been reaching for her phone to call Ryan when the front door had exploded inward, revealing FBI agents in bulletproof vests with weapons drawn. Isabella Blackstone, the lead agent, had called out, "You're under arrest for embezzlement of federal funds and wire fraud." "There's been a mistake," Isabella had said, standing slowly with her hands raised, acutely aware of her pregnant belly and the twin babies who were suddenly in danger. "I haven't embezzled anything." "Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back," the agent had instructed, approaching her with handcuffs. "I'm 6 months pregnant," Isabella had protested as cold metal closed around her wrists. "Can't we discuss this calmly? I can show you that there's been some kind of error." "You'll have plenty of time to discuss it with your attorney," the agent had replied, leading her toward the door. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Isabella's neighbors had watched from their windows as she was loaded into the back of an FBI vehicle, still in her pajamas and slippers, her pregnant belly making it difficult to maneuver into the seat with her hands cuffed behind her back. "Please," Isabella had begged the female agent sitting beside her. "I need to call my husband. He needs to know what's happening." "You'll get your phone call at the station," the agent had replied. "Mrs. Blackstone, I suggest you use it to call a lawyer." The processing at the federal courthouse had been a blur of fingerprints, photographs, and paperwork that detailed charges Isabella couldn't believe were being filed against her. $5 million allegedly stolen from the Blackstone Foundation over a period of 18 months. Bank accounts in her name containing money she had never seen. Email authorizations bearing her digital signature approving transfers she had never requested. Mrs. Blackstone, her court-appointed attorney, had said during their brief consultation, "The evidence against you is substantial. I strongly recommend you consider a plea agreement." "I didn't do any of this," Isabella had insisted, cradling her belly as the twins kicked restlessly, seemingly agitated by their mother's stress. "Someone has set me up. Someone with access to my credentials and authorization codes. The prosecution has security footage of you accessing the accounts," the attorney had replied, reviewing the file. "They have emails from your computer approving the transfers. Mrs. Blackstone, unless you can prove someone else had access to your credentials, this case is going to be very difficult to defend. My husband has access to everything," Isabella had said desperately. "Ryan has my passwords, my security codes, access to my computer and email, but he would never do this to me. He loves me." The attorney had given her a look that was both pitying and skeptical. "Mrs. Blackstone, I've seen many cases where spouses turn on each other when money is involved. Are you certain your husband is above suspicion?" Before Isabella could answer, another attorney had entered the consultation room, his expensive suit and confident manner immediately distinguishing him from the overworked public defender. "Mrs. Blackstone, I'm James Morrison, representing your husband in this matter," the new attorney had said. "I'm here to inform you that Mr. Blackstone is cooperating fully with the federal investigation." "Cooperating how?" Isabella had asked, though she already suspected the answer would devastate her. "Mr. Blackstone has provided the FBI with complete access to all company and foundation records," Morrison had explained. "He's also given testimony about your exclusive control over the foundation's financial operations and your increasingly secretive behavior regarding money management." "Ryan testified against me?" Isabella had whispered, feeling her world crumble completely. "Mr. Blackstone testified truthfully about the facts as he knows them," Morrison had corrected. "He's expressed his shock and dismay at these allegations, but he cannot allow personal feelings to interfere with justice. Isabella had sat in stunned silence, processing the fact that her husband, the father of her unborn children, had chosen to cooperate with prosecutors rather than defend her innocence. "Where's Ryan now?" Isabella had asked quietly. "Mr. Blackstone has traveled to Las Vegas for meetings with potential investors," Morrison had replied. "The timing is unfortunate, but these meetings were scheduled months ago and involve significant business opportunities that can't be postponed." Las Vegas. While she sat in jail facing federal charges, pregnant with his twins, Ryan was in Las Vegas conducting business as usual. That evening, Isabella had used her one phone call to reach Ryan, desperate to hear his voice tell her that this was all a mistake, that he would hire the best lawyers and get her released immediately. Instead, she had heard female laughter in the background and her husband's cold voice telling her that he couldn't be associated with her scandal. If you've ever felt the devastating pain of betrayal by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button now, because this story is about to show you that sometimes our worst enemies are the people we love most. As Isabella sat in her jail cell that night, her hands protectively covering her swollen belly where Ryan's twins grew despite their father's abandonment, she began to understand that her fairy tale marriage had been built on lies. But what Isabella didn't yet know was that Ryan's betrayal was far more calculated and cruel than simple abandonment. As she tried to sleep on a narrow cot in an orange jumpsuit that barely fit over her pregnant belly, Ryan was toasting his freedom in a penthouse suite with the woman who had helped him orchestrate Isabella's downfall. The woman whose laughter Isabella had heard in the background of their phone call. The woman who had been sharing Ryan's bed while Isabella believed she was sharing his heart. The woman who had helped him steal $5 million and frame his pregnant wife for the crime. Sophia Loren had started as Ryan's executive assistant 3 years earlier, but she had quickly become much more than that. Beautiful, ambitious, and completely without conscience, Sophia had recognized an opportunity when she saw Ryan's growing distance from his pregnant wife. To phase one, Sophia had said that night in their Vegas suite, raising her champagne glass to toast their success. "Isabella is exactly where we need her." "I almost felt sorry for her during that phone call," Ryan had admitted, though his guilt hadn't prevented him from clinking his glass against Sophia's. "She sounded so desperate." "That's the point," Sophia had replied, settling into his lap with the casual intimacy of a woman who owned a man completely. "Ryan, desperate people make mistakes. And when Isabella makes enough mistakes trying to prove her innocence, the evidence against her becomes even more convincing." "And the twins?" Ryan had asked, his hand resting on Sophia's flat stomach instead of his wife's pregnant belly. "Unfortunate collateral damage," Sophia had said without emotion. "But Ryan, think about what we're gaining. $5 million in untraceable offshore accounts, plus Isabella's portion of the foundation assets once she's convicted. And when the divorce is finalized, you'll have complete control of Blackstone Industries without her moral objections to your expansion plans." Ryan had nodded, pushing away thoughts of Isabella alone in jail while carrying his children. "How long before the divorce can be finalized?" "My attorney says 6 months minimum," Sophia had replied. "But Ryan, we need to be careful about the timeline. If you file too quickly, it looks calculated. We need to maintain the appearance that you're a heartbroken husband who tried to stand by his wife until the evidence became overwhelming." "And after that?" Ryan had asked, his hands roaming over Sophia's body while his pregnant wife lay on a jail cot 3 states away. "After that, you marry me," Sophia had said with a predatory smile. "And we enjoy the life that Isabella's money bought us." Neither Ryan nor Sophia had noticed the small recording device hidden in the suite's flower arrangement, placed there by a woman who had been watching their affair for months and was finally ready to expose the truth. Maria Santos, investigative journalist for the Washington Herald, had received her first anonymous tip about Ryan Blackstone's affair 6 weeks earlier. A source claiming to have evidence that the tech CEO was living a double life while his wife managed his charitable foundation. "I can prove he's been stealing from his own foundation," the anonymous caller had said during their first conversation. "And I can prove he's framing his pregnant wife for his crimes." Maria had been skeptical initially. Stories about wealthy men cheating on their wives were hardly groundbreaking journalism. But as she had dug deeper into the Blackstone Foundation's finances, she had discovered irregularities that suggested something far more sinister than simple adultery. The transfers don't match Isabella Blackstone's documented work schedule, Maria had explained to her editor while reviewing bank records. She was at Foundation events with hundreds of witnesses during times when these embezzlement transactions allegedly took place. So either she had help, or someone else was using her credentials, her editor had replied. Maria, who else had access to the Foundation's financial systems? According to their corporate structure, only 3 people, Maria had said, spreading documents across her desk. Isabella Blackstone as Foundation Director, the CFO James Peterson, and Ryan Blackstone as CEO with override authority for all company accounts. And where were Peterson and Ryan Blackstone when these transactions occurred? Peterson was in London setting up the European office, Maria had said, checking travel records. But Ryan Blackstone was in New York with full access to all systems and Isabel's credentials. Maria's investigation had intensified after Isabella's arrest. Something about the pregnant woman being led away in handcuffs while her husband was conspicuously absent had triggered Maria's instincts about the story's real scope. Mrs. Chun, Maria had said during her interview with Isabella's doctor. Can you describe Mrs. Blackstone's mental state during her pregnancy? Isabella has been under tremendous stress, Dr. Chun had replied carefully. Her husband's frequent absences have left her feeling isolated during what should be an exciting time. Has she mentioned any concerns about her marriage? She's mentioned feeling disconnected from her husband, Dr. Chun had said. And she's expressed worry about his lack of enthusiasm regarding the pregnancy. Dr. Chun, in your professional opinion, is Isabella Blackstone capable of the crimes she's been charged with? Dr. Chun had been quiet for a long moment before responding. Maria, I've been treating Isabella for 3 years. She's one of the most ethical, compassionate people I've ever known. The idea that she would steal money meant to help women and children is absolutely preposterous. Maria's investigation had led her to several Foundation employees who painted a picture of Isabella as a dedicated advocate who worked tirelessly to expand the organization's impact. Mrs. Blackstone personally visits every shelter and school we fund, Rebecca Martinez, a Foundation program coordinator, had told Maria. She knows the names of kids in our programs, remembers their stories, follows up on their progress. Someone who cares that deeply about our mission wouldn't steal from it. What about her relationship with her husband? Maria had asked. Complicated, Rebecca had admitted. Mr. Blackstone started coming around less and less over the past year. And when he did visit, there was tension between them that everyone could feel. What kind of tension? The kind that comes when one person is hiding something from the other, Rebecca had said carefully. Maria's breakthrough had come when she tracked down Sophia Loren's employment history and discovered a pattern of affairs with wealthy, married men that had preceded her position at Blackstone Industries. Sophia Loren has a type, Maria had explained to her editor after reviewing Sophia's background. Successful, older men with assets worth targeting. She worked for 3 different companies over the past 5 years, and in each case, she had affairs with married executives who ended up divorced within 2 years of her employment. That's suspicious, but not necessarily criminal, her editor had pointed out. But the financial patterns are, Maria had replied, pulling up bank records she'd obtained through investigative channels. In each case, money went missing from company accounts, and in each case, the executive's wife was blamed for the financial irregularities. You're suggesting Sophia Loren is running a long-term con. I'm suggesting she's perfected a system for destroying marriages and stealing money while making it look like the wives are responsible, Maria had said. And I think Isabella Blackstone is her latest victim. The recording device in the Vegas suite had been Maria's gamble, planted during a brief window when hotel security cameras were being serviced. The conversation she captured between Ryan and Sophia had provided the evidence needed to expose their conspiracy. To phase 1, Sophia's voice was crystal clear on the recording. Isabella is exactly where we need her. I almost felt sorry for her during that phone call. Ryan's voice revealed both guilt and callousness. She sounded so desperate. That's the point. Ryan, desperate people make mistakes. And when Isabella makes enough mistakes trying to prove her innocence, the evidence against her becomes even more convincing. Maria had listened to the entire conversation with growing outrage and determination. Isabella Blackstone wasn't just an innocent woman wrongfully accused. She was a pregnant mother being systematically destroyed by the two people who should have protected her most. The next morning, Maria had driven to the county jail where Isabella was being held, knowing that she had evidence that could free an innocent woman and expose one of the most calculated betrayals she had ever investigated. But first, Isabella would have to survive another night in jail while her husband celebrated with his mistress, neither of them knowing that their carefully constructed conspiracy was about to crumble under the weight of truth. As Isabella lay on her narrow cot, feeling her twins move restlessly inside her, she had no idea that help was coming. She only knew that the man she had loved and trusted completely had abandoned her in her darkest hour, leaving her to face an uncertain future alone. What Isabella didn't know was that sometimes our darkest moments become the catalyst for our greatest victories, and that the truth has a way of surfacing just when we need it most. The next morning, Maria Santos stood outside the county jail holding a visitor's pass and a briefcase containing evidence that could change Isabella Blackstone's life forever. The imposing concrete building looked more like a fortress than a place where justice was supposed to be served, and Maria felt anger rising in her chest thinking about the innocent woman trapped inside. "I'm here to see Isabella Blackstone," Maria told the guard at the visitor's desk. "I'm a journalist with new evidence in her case." "Visiting hours don't start until 10, the guard replied without looking up from his paperwork. "This is urgent," Maria insisted. "I have evidence that could prove her innocence." The guard finally looked up, studying Maria's press credentials and the legal documents she carried. "Ma'am, if you have evidence in a federal case, you need to contact the FBI, not visit the defendant." "I will contact the FBI," Maria said firmly. "But first, I need to speak with Mrs. Blackstone to verify some details. Please, she's 6 months pregnant and shouldn't be in here in the first place." Something in Maria's tone must have convinced the guard, because he picked up his phone and made a call to someone upstairs. "Wait here," he said finally. "Someone will be down to escort you." 30 minutes later, Maria found herself sitting across from Isabella in a small room with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. Isabella wore an orange jumpsuit that barely fit over her pregnant belly, and her face showed the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept properly in days. "Mrs. Blackstone, I'm Maria Santos with the Washington Herald," Maria said gently. "I've been investigating your case, and I believe you're innocent." Isabella looked up with eyes that held both hope and wariness. "Why would you believe that when everyone else, including my own husband, thinks I'm guilty?" "Because I have evidence that proves you were set up," Maria said, pulling a small recording device from her briefcase. "Mrs. Blackstone, what I'm about to play for you will be difficult to hear, but it proves that your husband and someone named Sophia Loren conspired to frame you." "Sophia Loren?" Isabella's face went pale. "Ryan's assistant? What does she have to do with this?" "She's much more than his assistant," Maria said carefully. "Mrs. Blackstone, your husband has been having an affair with Sophia for over a year. Together, they stole the $5 million and used your credentials to make it look like you were responsible." Isabella stared at Maria in shock, her hands instinctively moving to protect her belly. "That's impossible. Ryan loves me. We're having twins together. He would never." "I know this is devastating," Maria said softly. "But Mrs. Blackstone, I need you to listen to this recording. I captured this conversation last night in their hotel suite in Las Vegas." Maria pressed play, and Sophia's voice filled the small room with venomous clarity. "To phase 1. Isabella is exactly where we need her." Isabella's face crumpled as she heard Ryan's voice responding. "I almost felt sorry for her during that phone call. She sounded so desperate." "That's the point," Sophia's voice continued. "Ryan, desperate people make mistakes. And when Isabella makes enough mistakes trying to prove her innocence, the evidence against her becomes even more convincing." Isabella began crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her husband and his mistress discussing her destruction with casual cruelty. "And the twins?" Ryan's voice asked. "Unfortunate collateral damage," Sophia replied without emotion. "But Ryan, think about what we're gaining. $5 million in untraceable offshore accounts, plus Isabella's portion of the foundation assets once she's convicted. Maria stopped the recording and handed Isabella tissues, watching the pregnant woman struggle to process the magnitude of her husband's betrayal. "He set me up," Isabella whispered. "Ryan actually set me up and let me come to jail while pregnant with his children." "Not just set you up," Maria said grimly. "According to my investigation, this isn't Sophia's first time running this kind of con. She's done this to at least 3 other wealthy men, destroying their marriages and stealing their money while making their wives take the blame." "How long have they been planning this?" Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. "Based on the financial patterns, probably since Sophia was hired 18 months ago," Maria replied. "Mrs. Blackstone, they've been systematically moving money and creating false evidence against you while conducting their affair right under your nose." Isabella sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the complete destruction of everything she had believed about her marriage and her husband. "What happens now?" Isabella finally asked. "Even with this recording, I'm still in jail facing federal charges." "Now we take this evidence to the FBI and demand they reopen the investigation," Maria said firmly. "Mrs. Blackstone, this recording proves conspiracy, fraud, and perjury. Your husband is going to face serious criminal charges." "And my babies?" Isabella asked, her hands covering her swollen belly where the twins had been unusually active, as if sensing their mother's distress. "You're going to get out of here and give birth to healthy children who will grow up knowing their mother is a hero, not a criminal," Maria said with conviction. "Mrs. Blackstone, I promise you that justice will be served." As Maria left the jail to deliver the recording to federal investigators, Isabella remained in her cell, feeling the twins kicking restlessly inside her. The betrayal was so complete, so calculating, that she could barely comprehend it. Ryan hadn't just abandoned her. He had orchestrated her destruction while she carried his children. But for the first time since her arrest, Isabella felt something other than despair. She felt rage. Pure, righteous anger at the man who had stolen not just money, but her freedom, her reputation, and her children's chance to be born in safety. That afternoon, FBI agent Sarah Mitchell sat in her office reviewing the recording Maria Santos had provided, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "Agent Rodriguez," she called to her partner, "you need to hear this. The Blackstone case just became much more complicated." Agent Rodriguez listened to the recording twice, shaking his head in disgust. "They're laughing about framing a pregnant woman. And this Sophia Loren, she's done this before?" "According to Santos's research, this is her pattern," Agent Mitchell replied. "Seduce wealthy married men, steal their money, frame their wives, then disappear with the assets." "What about Ryan Blackstone's testimony against his wife?" "Perjury, at minimum," Agent Mitchell said grimly. "Maybe conspiracy and wire fraud as well." "Rodriguez, we need to arrest both of them immediately." "They're still in Vegas?" "According to Santos, they're staying at the Bellagio in the penthouse suite under assumed names," Agent Mitchell said, pulling up hotel records on her computer. "But Rodriguez, they're planning to fly to the Cayman Islands tomorrow morning. If we don't move fast, they'll disappear with the money." Within hours, FBI agents in Las Vegas were coordinating with their colleagues in Washington to execute simultaneous arrest warrants. The plan was to arrest Ryan and Sophia while they celebrated their success, using their own recorded confessions as evidence. Meanwhile, Isabella's court-appointed attorney, David Chun, was reviewing the new evidence with growing excitement. "Mrs. Blackstone, this recording changes everything," he told Isabella during an emergency meeting at the jail. "Not only does it prove your innocence, but it provides evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud that could send your husband to prison for 20 years. "What about my babies?" Isabella asked, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as stress caused the twins to move frantically inside her. "David, I can feel that something's wrong. The stress is affecting them." "We're going to get you released immediately," David promised. "I'm filing an emergency motion to dismiss all charges based on this new evidence." "Isabella, you could be out of here by tomorrow." "And then what?" Isabella asked. "My husband destroyed my life. Even if I'm cleared of charges, how do I rebuild from this?" "One step at a time," David said gently. "First, we get you out of jail and make sure you and the babies are healthy. Then, We make sure Ryan and Sophia face consequences for what they've done to you. That evening, as Isabella tried to sleep on her narrow jail cot, she was awakened by sharp pains in her abdomen. The twins were moving violently, and she could feel her body responding to stress in ways that terrified her. "Guard," Isabella called out, pressing the emergency button in her cell. "Something's wrong. I need medical attention." The jail's medical staff arrived 20 minutes later, but by then Isabella was doubled over in pain, feeling contractions that shouldn't be happening at only 28 weeks of pregnancy. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," the nurse said after checking Isabella's vital signs. "She's showing signs of premature labor." "I can't lose my babies," Isabella sobbed as she was loaded onto a stretcher. "Please, they're all I have left. Don't let me lose them." "Ma'am, we're going to do everything possible to stop the labor and keep your babies safe," the paramedic assured her as they raced toward the county hospital. At the same time, 3,000 miles away in Las Vegas, Ryan Blackstone was about to discover that his carefully constructed conspiracy was crumbling around him. "Ryan, baby, wake up," Sophia said, shaking him roughly as she stared at her phone. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Ryan asked groggily, checking the clock on the nightstand. It was 3 a.m., and they had been celebrating late into the night. "My contact at the FBI just sent me a warning," Sophia said, her face pale with panic. "Someone gave them a recording of our conversation last night." "What recording?" Ryan asked, though ice was already forming in his stomach. "The one where we discussed framing Isabella," Sophia snapped. "Ryan, they know everything. We need to leave for the Caymans right now." Ryan sat up, fully awake now as the implications sank in. "How could anyone have recorded us? We were alone in our suite." "It doesn't matter how," Sophia said, already throwing clothes into suitcases. "What matters is that the FBI is probably on their way here right now. We can't just disappear," Ryan said, though he was already reaching for his clothes. "My company, my reputation, everything I've built. Everything you've built is going to be gone anyway if we don't leave immediately," Sophia said harshly. "Ryan, they have us on tape discussing conspiracy and fraud. Do you understand what that means?" Before Ryan could answer, the suite's door exploded inward as FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the room with weapons drawn. "Ryan Blackstone and Sophia Loran, you're under arrest," Agent Williams announced as both suspects were forced to the floor. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is a mistake," Ryan protested as handcuffs closed around his wrists. "I'm a respected businessman. I've done nothing wrong." "Mr. Blackstone, we have you on tape discussing the conspiracy to frame your pregnant wife for crimes you committed," Agent Williams said coldly. "I suggest you save your explanations for your attorney." As Ryan and Sophia were led away in handcuffs, still in their pajamas and robes, news cameras captured their perp walk for the morning broadcast that would destroy Ryan's reputation forever. Back in Washington, Isabella was fighting a different battle in the labor and delivery ward of County General Hospital. "Mrs. Blackstone, I need you to try to relax," Dr. Patricia Reeves said as she monitored the twins' heartbeats. "Stress can trigger premature labor, and we need to keep these babies inside you for at least 4 more weeks." "I can't relax," Isabella gasped between contractions. "My husband betrayed me. I'm facing federal charges, and now my babies are trying to be born in jail." "You're not in jail anymore," Dr. Reeves said gently. "And Mrs. Blackstone, I just received a call from your attorney. The charges against you are being dropped. You're a free woman." Isabella stared at the doctor through her pain. "Free? The FBI arrested your husband and his accomplice this morning," Dr. Reeves explained. "They have evidence that you were framed." "Isabella, you're innocent, and everyone knows it now." Despite her relief, Isabella's labor continued to progress dangerously fast. The twins, as if responding to their mother's emotional turmoil, seemed determined to enter the world whether or not it was safe for them. "Dr. Reeves, I can't stop this," Isabella panted. "They're coming. Then we're going to deliver your babies and make sure they're as healthy as possible," Dr. Reeves said, calling for the neonatal intensive care team. "Isabella, these twins are fighters, just like their mother." For hours later, Isabella lay exhausted in a hospital bed, staring at 2 tiny babies in incubators who were fighting for their lives at 32 weeks gestation. Sophia Elena Blackstone weighed 3 pounds, 2 ounces, and Ryan Alexander Blackstone weighed 3 pounds, 4 ounces. "They're beautiful," Maria Santos said softly, standing beside Isabella's bed as they watched the babies through the NICU window. "And they're going to be fine. I named them before I knew the truth about their father," Isabella said quietly. "Now the boy carries the name of the man who tried to destroy us." "Names don't define character," Maria replied. "Those babies are going to grow up knowing their mother is a hero who survived the ultimate betrayal to protect them." "What happens to Ryan and Sophia now?" Isabella asked. "They're facing federal charges for conspiracy, fraud, perjury, and embezzlement," Maria explained. "Based on the evidence, they're looking at 15 to 20 years in prison each. And the foundation money? Being returned to the accounts where it belongs," Maria said. "Isabella, you'll have more than enough resources to raise your children and continue the foundation's work if you choose to." Isabella looked at her premature babies, fighting for life in their incubators, and felt a strength rising in her chest that she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm going to rebuild," Isabella said firmly. "Not just the foundation, but everything Ryan tried to destroy. And Maria, I'm going to make sure that what happened to me never happens to another woman." 6 months later, Isabella stood in the courtroom holding her healthy twin babies, now 6 months old and thriving despite their premature birth, as the judge read Ryan's sentence. "Mr. Blackstone, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, perjury, and obstruction of justice," Judge Harrison announced. "Your crimes were particularly heinous because they involved betraying and attempting to destroy an innocent woman who was carrying your children." Ryan sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit replaced with an orange jumpsuit, his confident demeanor shattered by months of legal proceedings that had exposed every detail of his conspiracy. "Your Honor," Ryan's attorney said, standing for the sentencing phase, "my client asks for mercy based on his previous contributions to charity and his expressed remorse for his actions." "Contributions to charity?" Judge Harrison looked incredulous. "Mr. Blackstone, you stole $5 million from a charitable foundation and framed your pregnant wife for the crime. Where exactly is the charitable contribution in that?" Isabella listened from the gallery as the judge continued, feeling her daughter Sophia gurgle contentedly in her arms while her son Alexander slept peacefully. "Mr. Blackstone, you will serve 22 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years, Judge Harrison announced. Additionally, you will pay full restitution to the Blackstone Foundation and personally compensate your ex-wife for wrongful imprisonment and emotional damages in the amount of $50 million. Ryan's head dropped into his hands as the reality of his sentence sank in. He would be nearly 60 years old before he had any chance of freedom, and his children would be adults who had grown up knowing their father as a criminal who had tried to destroy their mother. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, this court is ordering that you have no contact with your children until they reach the age of majority and choose to contact you themselves. Mr. Blackstone, you forfeited your parental rights when you chose to frame their mother while she was pregnant. As Ryan was led away in shackles, he looked toward Isabella one last time. She met his gaze steadily, holding the children he would never know, surrounded by the supporters who had helped her rebuild her life from the ashes of his betrayal. Sophia Loran received 18 years, Maria Santos told Isabella after the sentencing. Her previous victims testified about similar schemes, and the judge considered her a career criminal. It's over, Isabella said, feeling relief wash over her for the first time in almost 2 years. It's finally over. No, Maria corrected with a smile. Isabella, this isn't over. This is the beginning. 2 years later, Isabella stood before a congressional committee, holding a detailed report about prison reform for pregnant women and the need for better legal protections for victims of domestic financial abuse. Congresswoman Martinez, she said, addressing the committee chair, my experience represents a systemic failure to protect innocent women and children from sophisticated financial crimes committed by their own spouses. Ms. Blackstone, Congresswoman Martinez replied, your foundation's work on this issue has been extraordinary. Can you tell us about the Isabella's Law legislation you're proposing? Isabella's Law would require independent legal representation for pregnant women facing federal charges, Isabella explained, her confidence and poise showing no trace of the broken woman who who had once sat in a jail cell. It would also mandate proper medical care for incarcerated pregnant women and provide emergency review procedures when new evidence emerges in cases involving family members. And the financial abuse protections? The legislation would require forensic financial investigation before charging spouses with embezzlement when the alleged perpetrator had access to the victim's credentials, Isabella said. Too many women are being framed for crimes committed by their abusive husbands. After her testimony, Isabella returned to her office at the newly renamed Isabella Rivera Foundation, where she worked to help women who had faced similar betrayals and injustices. "Mama," 4-year-old Sophia said as Isabella picked her up from the foundation's daycare center. "Miss Jennifer says you help ladies who are sad." "That's right, sweetheart," Isabella said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Mama helps ladies who need someone to believe in them, like how Miss Maria believed in you," Alexander asked, taking his mother's hand as they walked to their car. "Exactly like that," Isabella confirmed. "Sometimes people try to hurt us, but there are always good people who will help us if we don't give up." That evening, Isabella sat in her modest but comfortable home, reading bedtime stories to her twins while reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "Mama," Sophia said sleepily, "why don't we have a daddy like other kids?" Isabella had prepared for this question, knowing her children would eventually need to understand their father's absence. "Sometimes adults make very bad choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love," Isabella said gently. "Your biological father made choices that meant he couldn't be part of our family anymore. But we have you," Alexander said with 4-year-old wisdom. "And you're the best mama in the world. And we have each other," Sophia added, snuggling closer to her mother. Isabella looked at her children, these beautiful, healthy, happy babies who had survived premature birth and their father's abandonment to become confident, loving children who knew they were cherished. "Yes," Isabella said, holding them close. "We have each other, and that's everything we need." Later that evening, Isabella opened her laptop to review the Foundation's quarterly report. In the 2 years since Ryan's conviction, the organization had helped over 3,000 women escape financial abuse, provided legal aid to hundreds of wrongfully accused mothers, and successfully advocated for prison reform legislation in 12 states. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Maria Santos, who had become not just her advocate, but one of her closest friends. "Saw your congressional testimony on the news tonight. You were incredible. Those children are so lucky to have you as their mother." Isabella smiled as she typed her response. "We're all lucky to have people who believe in truth and justice. Thank you for saving my life." "You saved your own life," Maria replied immediately. "I just helped you prove what we all knew, that sometimes the people who try to bury us don't realize they're planting seeds." Isabella looked around her home, filled with photos of her children's milestones and awards recognizing her advocacy work. Ryan had tried to destroy her, but instead he had revealed a strength she never knew she possessed. She had lost a husband who was never worthy of her trust, but she had gained 2 beautiful children and a mission that gave meaning to every day of her life. "Mama," Alexander called from his bedroom. "Can you sing the brave song?" Isabella smiled, recognizing her son's request for the lullaby she had written during her darkest days in jail, when singing to her unborn babies was the only thing that gave her hope. "You are brave, you are strong, you are loved," Isabella sang softly as she tucked her children into their beds. "No matter what storms may come, you'll never be alone. You are brave, you are strong, you are loved." As she turned off their bedroom lights, Isabella reflected on the truth of those lyrics. She had discovered that being brave didn't mean not being afraid. It meant continuing to fight for what was right even when everything seemed hopeless. She had learned that being strong didn't mean never breaking. It meant finding ways to heal and help others heal too. And she had discovered that being loved didn't require a husband who would betray her. It meant loving herself and her children enough to build a life worth living. Ryan Blackstone had thought he was destroying Isabella Martinez when he framed her for his crimes. Instead, he had created Isabella Rivera, a woman whose strength had been forged in the fire of betrayal and whose purpose had been born in the ashes of a marriage built on lies. As Isabella prepared for bed in her peaceful home, she felt grateful for the journey that had brought her here. Not grateful for the pain or the betrayal, but grateful for the strength she had discovered, the children who had given her purpose, and the opportunity to ensure that other women wouldn't face the same injustices alone. She had been buried by the person who was supposed to love her most, but she had risen from that grave stronger than ever, ready to spend the rest of her life helping other women do the same. The twins she had protected in jail had become her greatest victory, and the empire she had built from the ashes of Ryan's betrayal was founded on something he had never understood: the unbreakable power of a mother's love and an innocent woman's determination to seek justice. If this story has shown you that betrayal can make us stronger, that truth always surfaces eventually, and that sometimes our worst enemies give us our greatest opportunities, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more powerful stories about triumph over adversity and the strength we never know we have until we need it most. Remember, when people try to bury you, they might not realize they're planting seeds. Your greatest victory could be growing in the soil of your deepest pain. Until next time, keep fighting for justice, keep believing in truth, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve less than respect, honesty, and love.